In the last video, we finished migrating our legacy to-dos application using our new project structure and scaffolding. In this video, we're going to add a new route for details for a particular to-do. We'll investigate routing, route controllers, and views in more detail. Just like before, to generate a new route, we'll use the M command line tool and the generator subcommand. This time we'll generate a route resource. And we'll put it under the to-dos resource, and we'll call this to-dos detail. Now when we hit enter, a few files and folders are created for us automatically. First, if I look at the route file, you can see down at the bottom that a new route was created called todos.detail. Now the first thing we're going to need to do is to change this path. You can see the default path that was created is still the root path, which is the same as our to-dos index route. So what I'm going to do is to create a new path. It's going to be prefixed with to-dos, and then we're going to create something called a dynamic route segment. That means I'm going to put a variable placeholder here. And we'll populate this variable with the actual value of the ID of the to-do at a later time. Okay, that's all we're going to do with this route definition. If I go back over into the project navigation and open up the client folder, you can see the other thing that was created was a new view for the route. And so here's our to-dos details folder, and we have our HTML, JS, and less files for the to-dos view. And that's where our standard to-dos detail template will be put. But if I navigate up to the controllers folder, you can see a new route controller was created. And this route controller is what will be used to control this route. So we'll be filling this in a second. Now I've opened up the browser so that we can start writing some new HTML code. Currently, we have no way to get to our new view other than to type the URL directly into the URL bar. So I could type to-dos and then some ID. And that'll take us to our to-dos detail page. But what I'd really like to be able to do is to go to a to-dos detail page for a particular task by clicking a link. So back in our code, let's open up the view for the index. And you can see for each item we render out a to-do item. So actually what we want is the to-do item itself. And so let's show the subject. And I'll create a link here for the details page. Now in the href section, we could type in the to-dos link manually like this. But I find that a better thing to do, just in case the URL changes a little bit, is to use a special helper that comes with the iron router called path_for. So I can say path_for, and then the route is our to-dos detail. Now, one of the things I need to do here is just to make sure that I don't make a mistake. I like to say the params equals this. So remember that the data context for this template right now is a particular to-do item. That's why we're able to say subject like we are here, because we're taking the subject right off of the document, the to-do document. So when we say params equals this, what I'm saying is I want the params to be equal to the to-do document itself. And that way the ID of the document will get interpolated onto the URL. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, over in the browser, let me refresh this. We'll style this up in a little bit, but for now, if I mouse over, you can see that there's a URL, and that if I click on it, you can see the ID of that particular to-do has been put into the ID part of the URL segment. And if I click on the Learn Meteor to do, the ID up here will change. So this view so far isn't very exciting, so let's get some actual detail for the to-do item that we're on. In the to-dos detail template, let's get rid of the boilerplate there, and we'll just create a header, and we'll put the title or the subject of the to-do. Okay, so it looks like we don't have a subject yet. And so why is that? Well, if we come over to the to-dos area in the browser, and we go down to the console and we type todos.find.fetch, this will show us which to-dos are in our local mini-Mongo cache. And so far you can see that collection is empty. Now, if I go back to the main list view here, and I run that query one more time, you can see I actually have two to-dos. And that's because we subscribed to the to-dos index publish function inside of this route, but we didn't subscribe to anything on the details page. So when we navigate away from this index page, the subscription stops and all of those items are removed from the local cache. And so what we need to do is to go fill in our waiton function inside of our route controller. Inside the waiton function, I can call meteor.subscribe, and we haven't created this publish function yet, but we'll do that in a sec. Let's just subscribe to a publish function called todos detail. Now we're only going to subscribe to the to-dos detail for a particular to-do, and so we can pass up parameters like this. I can access the params object by calling the params property on this. And in this case, what we're going to do is grab the _ID property, because that's how we defined the path in the routes file. And so the value of this will be the actual ID of the to-do. And I'm going to pass that up as a parameter. And now we should start getting some errors because we haven't actually defined this yet. So we can go and create this publish function ourselves in the server folder, or we can just use the M tool. So to save some time, I'm just going to jump down to the console and use the M tool to scaffold it for us. So I'll type mg, and this time we're going to generate a publish function, and we're going to call it, we're going to put it in the to-dos folder and call it todos detail. And then if I refresh the navigation here and go into that, we can see that we have a todos detail publish function. Now we can pass up a parameter into this publish function. That will be the ID of the to-do. And what we want to do is to return a cursor. So you might be tempted to do this, todos find one, and then pass the ID this way. But find one returns an object, not a cursor. And one of the magical parts of publish functions in Meteor is that if you return a cursor, updates will be sent down to the client automatically. And so what we really want here is to return a cursor. And we can get that by calling the find method. So we're going to find a to-do with an ID of the one that was passed up as a parameter. So I'll hit save there. And now we should be subscribing to this to-dos detail, and to verify that we could do one of two things. We can do a query on the to-dos collection, and we can see that there's an object in there. We can also just click on the network tab and look at the DDP messages that are being sent down the wire. This is a really useful debugging technique, and I'm just going to refresh this to make sure we have the latest. And you can see which things we're actually subscribing to and then which documents are being sent down. And here you can see that there is at least one to-dos item being sent. But still, we're not seeing the subject show up in the user interface. So even though inside of our to-dos detail template, we've used this subject expression to get the value of the subject, we haven't set the data for the route yet. And so the template doesn't have what's called a data context, and it doesn't know where to get this subject from. So the next thing we need to do is to set that data context for this route. So I'll navigate over to the route controller. And what we can do is to return the value that we want to be the global data context from this data function here. So I can access the parameters inside this function as well. So I'm going to grab the ID, and then we'll return the result of calling find1. Now this time calling find1 is okay, because on the client both find and find1 are reactive, and so that's what we're looking for here. And I'm going to look for the to-do that has the ID of the one from the URL. And then once I clean up that spelling mistake on params and hit save again, now we have a subject that's showing up in the details page. In this video, we created a new route for the details view of to-dos, or of a particular to-do. And we looked more closely at how to create a new route, and then how to subscribe to a new subscription inside of the waiton function, and then finally how to return some data from the data function of a route controller to set a global data context.